Welcome, everyone. Hi, Ken. So go ahead, Tara, whenever you're ready. Oh, it's on mute. We can't hear it. So Tara, we still can't hear it.
Drivers of ecosystem data and storytellers. We work to create more opportunities for everyone to participate in our innovation ecosystem, working with strategic partners in BC and beyond. And our programs are designed to connect innovators to the resources they need to succeed. Looking to start and scale your business, or learn how to navigate human resources, digital marketing, or intellectual property? We'll connect you with experts in your field and mentors to help your business grow. Need funding? Our grant programs can help you hire talent, commercialize your research, and validate your technology. Searching for innovative solutions to your most pressing challenges? Tap into our network of BC's most promising innovators and solution providers. We help companies large and small across industries drive innovation forward, because BC is the best place to start, grow, and invest for tomorrow. Begin today and grow your idea with us. Innovate BC.
Well, welcome everybody to Innovate BC. It is Tuesday. I hope you are doing well. It's a beautiful day here in Amiskwachi, Waskagan, Edmonton, Treaty 6. I hope wherever you are there that it is a beautiful day as well. We got that little chill in the air. You know that season is beginning to shift and change. And I just think that that's beautiful. So welcome. We're honored you're joining us. I am really excited. We have two phenomenal speakers today. They're my favorite couple from BC. So we're honored that you're here. But before we get started, I always like just to take a moment, just to hold in that heart center, gratitude for something in this day. When you lifted your head from that pillow this morning, when that sun rose in the east, Creator meeting us for another day, what is one thing that you are grateful for? And it could be something as simple as I can drink water that comes out of my tap, because that's not always the situation in some of our First Nations communities. Or maybe I was just drinking some Starbucks, so that made me pretty happy. So all of these little moments along our day, there's always something to be grateful for. So I just invite you to hold that moment in your heart, or hold that in your heart just for a moment. Gratitude, is a way of life, and that helps us to walk in good ways. I can't help but think of our ancestors, who got up to greet that sun. That was one of our ceremonies. They would get up to greet the sun and have that place of gratitude. So it's medicine. So I hope you're doing well. I am really honored to introduce our guest speakers today. They're going to talk about leadership development. So this workshop will discuss ancestral leadership, Western leadership theory, First Nation leadership, character and competency, the characteristics of good governance for First Nation governments and corporations, and nation rebuilding. I feel like they're going to capture a lot, so I better get quickly introducing this couple and pass this mic on. But just a little bit about our guest speakers. Laara Yaghujaanas and Mark Salter are here. They've been here. If you go back into our CANDO webinar archives, you will find many sessions that they had offered for us. And they are brilliant people. So a little bit about Laara, she is supporting nation building for First Nations since 1997. She carries her great-grandmother's name, and I will let her say that. She holds a master's degree in Royal Roads University, was awarded the Royal Roads University Founders Award, has completed the Justice Institute Conflict Resolution and Negotiation course. So we got a powerhouse in our session this afternoon. And then we got Mark, who joined his partner in the summer of 2017 as a business and life partner. Mark has worked with First Nations for more than 10 years, including management services, developing intergovernmental partnerships. Mark has also completed the Justice Institute Conflict Resolution and Mediation Program and has been recognized by the Capital Region District and Lieutenant Governor General for environmental leadership. So listen, like I just read just the tip of the iceberg of what these folks have to offer. We are honored by their knowledge. We're honored by their presence. And so again, I'm ready. I got my pen and my paper. I'm ready to take notes. And I know you all will benefit from their knowledge sharing today. So I thank you all. Come with an open mind, open heart. And this is all about capacity building. So thank you for being with us. I pass this virtual mic off to you both. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Honored to be here today, and I will get started with some of this work. So I'll introduce myself in our protocol introduction. Haida Nation, and I'll let Mark introduce himself.
Greetings in Lakwungen. I'm Mark Salter, born and raised here in the Kusampson Lakwungen territory.
Okay, so thank you for being here today. We're going to go through a short workshop on leadership. And as Michelle was saying, I've got a master's degree in leadership and started this work 25 years ago, wanting to make a difference in the world for our people. And so when I started doing business and economic development, actually 26 years ago now, it was for the 55 Coast Salish nations, and decided that I wanted to look at more the root issues that our nations face. And as I started to go into community planning, realized that good corporate governance and good governance was what I felt would give us the highest opportunity to improve our world for our people. So we're coming to you from the ancestral territory of the Sauk people, and we're honored to be here today with you. We're going to talk about, as Michelle said, ancestral leadership, Western leadership theory, leadership, character and competency, good corporate governance, and nation rebuilding. And so feel free to ask questions as we go. We're here to serve you, Aiden, Geraldine, Ken, and Larry. And if you could please do me a favor and put in the chat room where you're coming to us from so we can see where you are and we can connect with you when you have conversations. So what we're going to talk about first is going into First Nations leadership development. And we want to recognize right at the outset that our ancestral leaders that had survived and thrived in our territories for 15, 20,000 years didn't do so by accident. They did so by learning and being humble and being connected and taking care of each other and finding mechanisms by which they could support healthy societies and healthy nations for thousands of years. And when we take a look at that, we know that when we can adopt those kinds of practices and revitalize that knowledge and that wisdom, we can continue that type of transfer of knowledge. Thank you, Ken. And what we're going to be doing is talking about also what first research on First Nations ancestors and surface leaders. And this isn't just my research. This is a huge range of research. But leaders who were First Nations in ancestral practices or knowledge about their own community, their values and their history, as well as other communities, were accomplished in their area of expertise, artfully maintained and passed on traditional knowledge, for example, the interconnection of all things and practices, supported unity, and serve because of their commitment to their people and future generations, not because of a desire for position or power. So that tells us a lot about what a good leader is. Thank you, Geraldine. When we take a look at research on traditional leadership, it also tells us that leaders were accountable, trustworthy, embraced self-government, were positive and empowered youth. When we take a look at what good leaders are, this is always the same conversation. This massive set of characteristics that help us to understand and look up to and admire those people, those elders, those ancestors, those aunties, those whoever's making a difference in your community. And when we see that type of characteristic, it also means that we can see it and we can conceive of it ourselves, which means we have inklings of that we can develop for ourselves within our own daily practice of leadership.
And of course, we can offer Western leadership theory as a way to balance the conversation. And we're probably going to have seen a little bit of this. But leadership was thought to have been something that was inherited. There was never any thoughtful leadership conversation or research done until very contemporary times. It was often thought only men could be leaders. Only thought that men who were educated and spoke a certain way could be leaders. But then in the 70s, research began, and things were developed in the way of theories, and more confusion was created. Since that time, leadership theory is increasingly considered a complex mix of traits, characteristics, and the behavior competency that one can learn and develop, and with greater focus on the outcomes for good leadership in terms of good corporate governance. So the purpose of this workshop will be to focus on the effect good leaders have in terms of good corporate governance, and share with you knowledge that will support your path to realize your goals and vision. So in a leadership situation in a corporate world, it's looking to humanize that experience, making sure you're bringing some of the human elements into that leadership. Just because it's business doesn't mean it doesn't include people and consideration for people. So it'll be one thing that we'll be emphasizing today, that connection to people.
So when we take a look at perceiving leadership, not from just a Western or an Indigenous perspective, again, all that research is aligning to the whole idea of not leadership in terms of its individual practice, but in how it's expressed through the actions and activities of individuals or groups of people in terms of good governance or good corporate governance. So we're going to talk a bit about that. And one of the most important things that we always talk about, and this is something that immediately comes to mind when I was talking about ancestral leadership, after so many years, I can't count the number of times I've had elders in the room and we talk about leadership and they pipe up and they always say, yeah, it starts from you first. It's like that saying that we hear so many wise elders also say, that when you heal one, you heal all. And when we take a look at leadership, it's the same idea. And when we take a look at trust and the work that's done, there's two aspects to leadership that we want to emphasize. One is your morals and ethics. What do you stand for? And if you don't know what you stand for, you'll fall for anything, is the saying. And it's very true. You have to go through that critical reflection on who you are and what your values are. What are those things you hold most dear and most important to you? Because they will define your behavior, whether you know it or not. So it's better to know what you stand for and really purposefully design your life to be in alignment with that. And then it's competency as well. In the former slide, we saw research again talking about how leaders ancestrally had developed their skills in the area of competency to be able to do the best work they can. Now, when we take a look at leadership, it doesn't mean you have to be have a master's degree in business or you have to have anything specific to that area. It means you have to have had developed yourself in some way to understand and take in more knowledge than you might not otherwise. And we're all learning from cradle to grave. So it's a lifelong process. So when we take a look at leadership skills, with that capacity, you have to think about, again, for yourself, the character of having an understanding of how comfortable are you with that vulnerability-based trust and being able to be open-hearted and open yourself to those conversations, that honesty to share your feelings, to share your concerns, to share where you might feel vulnerable. For example, if you're sitting at a table at a development corporation, someone brings up a set of pro formas, You need to be comfortable to say, I don't understand this pro forma. I don't understand what this line item means. I don't understand where we're getting those projections from, whatever it is. And be honest to say, because you need to understand to make the best decision and work possible for your communities and your people. That means you have to have humility, which means you have to say, I need to learn more things. And it's interesting because the most wise people, and over time, we've heard more people say, the more I learn, the less I know. And that's just a demonstration of humility. The more you understand, the more you realize that there's so much more to learn. And it's those people who think they know everything that actually are not the smartest. There's a lot of research that proves that as well. So learn to embrace humility and recognize that is one of our values as Indigenous people. And it's a good thing because it opens us up to learning. Learning and developing your own conflict resolution and your peacemaking and peace building skills so that you can have good relationships and know how to diplomatically, from an Indigenous diplomatic perspective, to build peace and to have that diplomacy to work and to establish good relationships, which means that you have to have emotional intelligence. And that's something that's more commonly known today in terms of understanding what you're feeling and how you're taking in the world. It also means that you have to thoughtfully and carefully lead from the heart, which means that you need to have a practice of self-care and reflection and understanding to center yourself so that in amidst what is the ongoing heightened pressure cooker of our worlds, including in business, that you can lead from a center of calmness, of clear-headedness, and of thoughtfulness to do the work you need to do. And that means leading from the heart. When we take a look at those morals and ethics, those values and principles, all of those things are critically important for you to develop yourself. You also need to develop those practical skills, that understanding that outside of yourself, you build your own capacity around your own nation or Indigenous perspectives, the history of your nation, your language as much as possible. And it doesn't mean you have to be a fluent speaker. Even just be open to learning and embracing the language and knowing that that's where the wisdom and knowledge of your nation is housed. It is in those words that we're able to understand huge depths of knowledge and wisdom that we can't tap into otherwise. It also means you need to think about and understand your ancestral governing system, how your community works, because despite the imposed chief and council system, if you want to move community economic development planning and you decide you want to engage community to participate in that planning, which is the ideal, what you want to be able to do is to tap in those systems of how people come together to discuss and learn and understand, and to be able to come to agreement on things, which for many communities are families or clan systems, and other ways of coming together. And it's very important to know what that looks like for you. And I know, for example, Aidan from Calgary, that might not be as evident as some people in BC where you see those family and clan systems, but they are there if you look for them. If they're not, you can just say extended family, because that's universal across Indigenous people. We didn't have nuclear families as a part of the industrial Western model. We had extended families. So everybody's auntie, in other words, which is great. It means we're that recognition of connection. Or Geraldine Edmonton, you might be looking into how to engage community locally to understand how to best serve your people. And it might mean that you speak to the elders to find out, how do we engage people? What is the cultural way we would do it? And then give you all sorts of advice. So you listen to those and learn those systems so you can tap into the most efficient systems you can, because that's how your nations work. You also have to know your values and the ancestral roles of leaders, starting with the whole understanding of interconnection, to move away from those Western ideas of individualism that have proven faulty over and over again, including the psychologist who invented the whole idea of individuality or individualism. And develop a foundational understanding of what your government or your corporation, your DevCorps system is looking like from a systems perspective. So the best way to do that is to use mind map and bubbles and think about and draw how your development corporation or your business or your holdings are working and how they work in relationship to the nation and to other institutions that you are connected with. Once you do that, you start to move into very much a natural systems thinking that allows you to better analyze how to move forward, what challenges there might be, and how to develop your work, whether it's a DevCore or your own business, in a meaningful way. One of the most important hallmarks from the Western world that we know that is also part of our Indigenous worldview is collaborative leadership. We are never alone. We are not an island unto ourselves. That's a fallacy. That's a part of that whole individualism kind of thinking. And collaborative leadership is a hallmark, as is heart-centered leadership of good leaders. So working together is a must. Information management, understanding how organizations develop, how you work together as a team, how do you solve problems as a team, and how do you manage finances. Those are just a few of those things that you can learn and develop your skills in those areas and be open to always learning. Now, one thing I just want to say about that before we move on to the next slide is that you cannot be everything for everyone. So what you want to do at the same time is recognize your strengths, but also recognize where those weaknesses are, making it challenging for you, and build those areas, as well as continuing to focus on your strengths. You can't be the accountant, the dishwasher, and a manager all at the same time. You need to be able to say, I'm good at management, I'm hiring an accountant, I'm hiring a janitor, whatever those things are that get you to focus on your strengths, but also, patch those areas that might be challenges for you. So those are two really important aspects to look at for yourself. And the biggest way is starting from your center and then moving outwards to see what can I give to my community to serve my communities in terms of what I bring to the table, both in character and in competency.
And the subject of competency is a function of character development. And competency speaks to what practical skills you can have especially in a corporate environment. And so looking at the ways to make yourself more competent, so you can then work on your character development at the same time. And in this case, if you look to the bottom of the slide, as your competency increases, you can then focus on good corporate governance and nation rebuilding as a item you look at, and all the other things that you will be addressing in your competency development. So you should know your current nation laws as they apply to their government and the administration, your information management systems. You should know those things, and they should be comfortable with finding the information on those things. That's your competency. Learn about the organizational development and discipline required to lead your nation. So then what are the practical things you need to know about being able to be a leader in your corporation and so forth. And then the concept of building a capable governing institution, which means you have rules that can manage your business and you can be independent. And then that sense of being independent and being able to achieve the goals you have set out is a part of nation rebuilding, because you're going to apply the same principles to the community that's the business is serving. And of course, as part of your competency is looking to replace yourself. Succession planning. You're doing no one any favors if when you leave, you haven't shared your knowledge and your skills and your goals and aspirations with another generation of people from your community to take on that role of leading your corporate entities. So it's a fail if when you have a turnover or if something happens and someone passes on and they haven't planned for their not being there by purpose or by design, then that's a fail. And so that's part of your competency growth, is making sure that no one's not replaceable. Everyone should be planning to be replaced. It's really important, because that's what they spoke to about ego and managing yourself and your emotions. Know that you're not more than the company, the entity that's there. It's there to serve the long-term needs of your community. And so competency to know how to move that forward is really important. And of course, today, part of competency is knowing about UNDRIP and about human rights. And as it applies in British Columbia, the act of UNDRIP is now a form of government law in British Columbia. We refer to it as RIPA. And so it's part of community economic development and how that's connected to lands and resources in your nation's territories. being competent and comfortable with those subjects is really, really critical today for leadership in a corporate world, because that's part of the sovereignty of nations building. So that's really an important part of your task as a corporate leader, to be able to not run the business, but also think about its future and how it affects the needs of your community today and in the future. Really critical. Thanks. We chat about undone and undrip there. Yeah. It's the newest thing.
Okay, so when we take a look at character and competency, I just want to see if there's any questions around that. Ken in Ontario, Larry in Winnipeg, Geraldine and Aiden. Any questions, any reflections that you want to ask any questions about that we might be able to answer? Because this is such a short workshop and you probably have some questions that might be specific to your needs and interests.
It's Ken here. I have a reflection on what you said earlier on, which was to seek to understand before you open your mouth. If you don't understand, say you don't understand, and make sure that you understand. There's a saying that people forget what you say, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And if you understand what they're saying, that's a first step towards that. While I got the floor, the second thing is somebody mentioned that today, earlier today, was that before you speak to somebody, look at that person and pick out one thing that you really like about that person. You don't have to say it. It's a gift if you say it, if you just choose to give them the gift of what you like about them, but keep it in your mind when you're talking to them, and your words are going to sound heck of a lot softer. Anyway, I'll give up the floor.
Thank you so much, Ken. I also wanted to add what you said too, and then the reason why holding on to how that person is connected to you and how that person is valued by you is really important, because there is a direct correlation psychologically to the outcomes of our interactions with others when we view others as friends, as allies, as interconnected with us, as opposed to sometimes when you've got your back up and you might not want to have that meeting or something. When you go in with that positive mindset, you end up with better outcomes. So thank you so much for mentioning all those, Ken. Really appreciate it. Okay, so when we move on to good corporate governance, what we know is that around the world, for all people, that there are the hallmarks of good corporate governance and good governance that are led by certain things that we see in individuals, teams of leaders, and organizations. And this is research undertaken by the United Nations that creates a more fair and just society that allows us to meet the needs of those citizens or members wherever we live in the world. And it's really important to know some of these because they really inform looking and reflecting at your organizations to say, does it have these things, and how can I help influence these things to be more realized? Because what happens is when nations are doing well and there is good governance and good corporate governance, we see better outcomes for those beneficiaries or members. When we see bad governance or emergencies, the first thing the UN does is they fly in crews of people to establish good governance using this matrix. So what we want to talk about is quickly the characteristics of good governance. That is the rule of law, starting first and foremost with your nation's laws, your ancestral or hereditary laws, as well as those laws that you and your nation deem appropriate and relevant, for example, as Mark was saying, UNDRIP. So you want to be able to take a look at the laws and how they apply to you. And again, when we say laws, we're really talking about any kind of agreement a society comes to in terms of laws, policies, any kind of agreement that establish those things in our societies that help us to do our best work for everyone. So following the rule of law, which means you help influence and develop them sometimes, and adhering to them. Effective and efficient, as Mark was saying, capable governing institutions are one of the most important hallmarks of nation rebuilding, that you purposefully and through discipline establish agreements on, or the policies that organize how your team does the work they're going to do in a proactive, pragmatic fashion before you get into trouble. And even if you get into trouble, you make sure you focus on those laws and policies that should be there to make sure you never have that again, which is a huge way of being just proactive and aware about what you're doing. Consensus orientation, meaning that you work towards getting everyone on the same page. And it's not just through a Western model of by voting, it's trying to get everyone to understand and agree upon situations and actions. And that means being inclusive. That means that you have as many people as you can, and especially those that are affected by any decisions, included in those agreements or those policies or laws. And equitable means that you have ensurety, that someone can look at those laws and those agreements and say, I know I'll be treated fairly because that community economic development plan says it'll come out in 3 years and I'll be able to feed into it, or that report's coming out and I know that in their policies that I have a right to go up and speak to what I want to see this development corporation to do, and I have a chance to participate in that, or I have a chance to apply for that First Nations grant contribution for a small business because everybody has that right. It's in their policies. So equality is a hallmark of one of our not only values, but should be a part of good corporate and good governance. Participatory means that we have people constantly engaged in the development of the corporate governance, whether it's a development corporation or taking a look at the community's economic development, including small business and diversification that can lead to a more sustainable economy. When we take a look at transparency, it means that you put all of your agreements, your policies and your bylaws and everything out there for everyone to see, including your plans and your reports, and you are holding yourself as transparent, as not hiding anything, so that everyone can see what you're doing and they can question it, and they, you know, with certainty that everyone has access to all the information that they need to, so that you can be accountable to them. Now, one step further, the accountability for corporate governance means that you have quarterly written reports and annual written reports, and that's the most common formation of that, or expression of accountability in good corporate governance.
We picked up on nation rebuilding as a component of competency, and Laara spoke to the concept of developing your corporate skills and your success in your corporation as a way to self-determination, self-government as a goal of every community. Part of that nation rebuilding component comes from that effort. And so in being practical, being those competent skills up there, you've got to work at creating sovereignty that is practical self-rule, where you're in charge, the corporation and the nation are working together to be empowered to make the necessary decisions to support each other. Capable of governing institution, which means that, you know, that there's a management structure inside your dev corps that's supported by the management and governance structure of the nation that you serve, and that you're both collaborating and complementing each other in the way you apply the laws, the way that things move forward. And that there be a cultural match, that the business should have an ability to bring in the values of your community as part of the way it operates. And if it can be expressed in the governing documents and the operational procedure documents of your corporation, the people who are employed there, who are members of the community, will feel at home and feel they're being respected for being there in a cultural way. And one way to then reignite the cultural heart of your community is to know that the corporation and all the things that it does is reflective of your values of your community, and that those things that are expressed by your staff and your operating processes are matching the values of your nation. And of course, being strategic oriented means that you've got to be as leaders in the organization, not necessarily operating the levers of it, but being there and looking to improve the long-term view of and success of the corporation through strategic orientation, trying to be very thoughtful about what happens next, not just dealing with whatever's going on every day. And of course, in the spirit of, you know, public leadership is, you know, you want to have people who are chosen to be part of your board and for the leadership structure of your organization that are there for the benefit of the community, not themselves. And so that's really an important part, is that there be a long-term strategy around improving the welfare and the conditions of your community and the environment your nation and territory are in, to make sure that that's the motivation for those you choose to stand up to be part of your leadership team and your governance of your organization. They've got to be someone who's not in it for themselves, but there to serve the entire community and the environment that supports your community's life in the territory you live in. So really critical component there.
And I want to build off what Mark was saying around capable governing institutions. So one of the fallacies that was out there from a couple decades ago was that there's a need to separate business from politics. And that was proven through extensive research to be false. The Harvard Nation Rebuilding Project that spoke to a little bit of that got it spun out of control. When I talked to Stephen Cornell, he really regrets that he had anything to do with that message getting out and getting misused to create a very apparently compelling case to completely separate, which is actually wrong. Capable governing institutions means that your nation and your development corporation have agreements on roles and responsibilities and how they're going to work together. And it's basically a marriage of those institutions that means that the members benefit the most. When it's a clear separation, the ineffectiveness goes through the roof. And when they're working well together, the effectiveness correlates and improves. So really important to realize that when we talk about capable governing institutions, it means that you support those organizations to work together well, not separating business from politics. So that means you have to have underpinned roles and responsibilities in writing, policies in writing on how things are done, but it also means that you work together with those organizations.
And the concept of the elected leadership of your community and the leadership of your development corporation have to have a very collegial and supportive relationship, and that in the true essence of nation rebuilding, the nation's leadership is supporting and directing the values and the goals of your dev corps, and that they don't conflict with each other. We don't want a development entity that we have in our territory being environmentally degrading our communities in traditional territory. That would be against our leadership values from our governance perspective. So you really got to have that reciprocity and understanding of how to work together as a team to meet the needs of your community as a whole.
Excellent. Okay, so when we take a look at good corporate governance, it's the work of collaboratively establishing and adhering to the rules or policies that organize actions and development to achieve the beneficiaries or the members' goals, which means that when you're looking at economic development, it's, again, doing it in a collaborative fashion, where you might have council starting out with the establishment of a CPP in coordination with the Community Economic Development Plan. But at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is to be able to collect from members their needs and interests in terms of economic development across the board. If it's not done that way, it could also be done individually as a community economic development plan, which allows your community to feed in, everyone have their voice in what they want to see realized. Now, when we do it, what we do is we do a sectoral analysis of all the areas: forestry, mining, tourism, agriculture, clean energy, all of those areas. And we do a provincial or a local analysis of industry trends and expected projections. And then we share that with members. And so, for example, if you were sitting in a session with us and we're talking about resource development and specifically to forestry, we would talk about how forestry management is in having some challenges, and we're seeing overall the industry really lagging behind what it could achieve, and that there isn't anything in terms of substantive growth, but we are seeing pockets of opportunities in terms of developing businesses that can grow the trees, businesses that can process forest firewood, all those types of opportunities that First Nations have that are unique. And that's what we would share, and then we collect that back to create a community economic development plan. So really important to know that even though we talk about a development corporation being a separate entity, it still is utilizing and benefiting from the funds that are held in trust of a nation. Rarely, I've never seen a First Nations Development Corporation started off with no monies and not benefiting from a nation's resources or assets. So really, at some point, you're going to be accessing the resources of the membership, financial or resources as a whole. And you really have a moral obligation then to engage them, to build their capacity, and to have this organization serve them as well. So one of the big things we talk about in terms of leadership development is always peel back the layers, look at what's going on. And in one of those areas, we always talk about what's called shareholder primacy. So in the business world, when we took a look at business and economic development, up until the Second World War, businesses would normally develop good things in their own communities as well as do good business and support employment and support health and hospitals and all sorts of neat things. What happened was in World War II, because of the concern for the economy, they created something in the legal framework called shareholder primacy that now is being recognized as gone out of control, where corporations don't answer to the members or the communities that they operate within, and they go to only report to shareholders. And in this case, most commonly we see development corporations reporting only to chief and council and no going back to members, which creates a disconnect. And so there's always resistance with members going, I don't know what that dev corps is doing. I don't know why they're buying none. There's very much resistance and non-acceptance of it. So it's really important to make sure that you move past some of those Western models of limited thinking that don't engage our members because you are using their resources. So it's really important to morally engage them and to serve them. So just some thinking behind that to take a look at how you operate outside of some of the challenges we see. Now, what we see normally, and this is just a couple of slides we added just because we thought it would be helpful, is that as you do that work, it's important to be open to feedback. Again, we're all learning cradle to grave. And what we see in development corporations, if you're not providing quarterly and annual reporting, you will get a concern because people don't know what's going on. And as that concern waxes and wanes and you're able to address them and be responsive to members' needs, you will see that balance out over time. But if you do a Trump and close your ears and listen to only the yes people, you'll see not only the negative feedback increase, but you'll see your effectiveness as an organization start to slide and drop off completely.
And we like to put a different sort of lens on this diagram. Imagine you're in a canoe, and in order to stay on a straight line, which is that checkered line on the screen, you need to have a stroke on both sides of the canoe. Both the positive and negative stroke maintains your canoe on the path that's intended. If you only stroke from the left side, you're going to curve to the left, as the diagram shows. So that being said, it's really important to make room for those people who have contrary views, so you can keep yourself straight and true to where you need to go.
And Mark always likes to say, nothing about us without us. And so as you develop your community economic development plan, you have to do that, but you have to have an ongoing opportunity for members to feed into your development of your organization, so that they can provide feedback and input into it. You not only grow capacity, you grow support when you do that. And one of the things that leaders in our organizations, whether it's a nation or a development corporation, have to recognize is their responsibility in developing the organizational capacity as a capable governing institution. All we have to do is look at Member 2, for example, and Member 2 is one nation that 20 years ago, I think close to 25 years ago, was led by Burnt Christmas, who's now working with the Squamish Nation on the west coast of Canada. And he looked at this and said, we're establishing a development corporation to improve the well-being of our members. And we need to make sure that we have policies in all areas, rules on how we operate our organization. In doing so, they developed enough of these individual processes that leads to policy, that leads to predictability and repeating processes that prove and improve outcomes, as well as making sure that you enhance those policies, not only with adhering to them, but always improving them. And over time, it means that you're going to have a capable governing institution. Well, Member 2 is one of those amazing stories where what they did was they set up this approach and they developed enough that they were able to get the International Standards Organization to be able to get them to certify them and allow them to be internationally certified. And because of that, they received enough support to be able to have partners from around the world knocking on their door literally the day after getting ISO certification. And they went from having a small budget to a multi-million-dollar budget in a very short period of time. So much so that they were able to manage without funds from ISC, and to be able to, only a couple of years ago when we heard about the west coast of Canada lobster fisheries, east coast, sorry, of Canada, when we saw that racism, despite the lobbying on their side. Member 2 is one of the neighboring nations to that said, this doesn't look good and this affects us. What can we do about it? And in their typical leadership style, they said, let's do something about it and work with these people. And they bought the largest fishery in Canada, which completely mitigated all those issues, which is amazing. Because of their organizational capacity, they could do this. I'm forgetting off the top of my head how many millions of dollars, but I think it was $25 million, or was it 250,
25.
that they purchased the largest fishery in Canada. Now, only a few months ago, or almost a year ago now, instead of headlines of racism against individual nations who had the law on their side for that right to harvest lobster, we saw the inverse. RCMP protecting Indigenous people because they had their corporate premises being attacked by racist people, and RCMP were pressing charges and actually doing something about it because of the leadership capacity being so big that, and these guys having their house in order enough to be able to buy the largest corporation in Canada. So lots to do about that. When we do take a look at that kind of leadership practice and establishing that leadership discipline to create policies and laws that ensure that everything goes the way it should, and you have those agreements laid out in writing around how things should operate, it's at 3 levels. It's taking a look at your largest, highest level in terms of good corporate governance, which might include a business charter, governance policies and agreements. And then you also have your overarching, what we call a development corporation general partnership or general or master agreement. And it means that you have those overarching financial management policies, HR policies, business plan policies, joint venture policies that say anything we do, business is going to operate this way. And then you also have your individual holdings, which will have unique financial and HR requirements for the sector, as well as making sure that your business plans are updated annually, so you can make sure that that lens of ensuring that all areas are operated in. So again, really detailed discipline that we need to develop in all of our areas to make sure that we can establish strong, capable governing institutions. So this is a really quick course in organizational development in that way too. Now, before we go on further, I know we've got about 10 minutes left. I want to ask Larry, Geraldine, Aidan, any questions or thoughts? Oh, Larry stepped away for a minute. So Aidan, Geraldine, Ken, any questions about some of these areas we're talking about? Or anything we've talked about to date?
It's Ken, if nobody else is going to speak up. It's on your strategic planning or strategic outlook. Is making the strategic outlook broad enough and communicating it and it so that it can adopt to changes, or alternately have a number of programs, strategic programs, or to support that master strategic plan, so that it, if you have a number of burners on the stove, so some of those may be turned off or on the back burner, but because of resistance or whatever, but at least that everybody knows what the broad objective is, and that you may turn some on and turn some off as conditions change. But having those alternative programs or support to the strategic plan, and having the strategic plan broad enough so people can understand it and communicate it. That was the only thought and the comment.
Yes, absolutely. So I think the most important part you said is understand and communicate it. So if you have members participating in the plan and then it's shared back to them and they validate it and they're a part of reviewing it in the annual work plan and the quarterly and annual reporting, they will understand it and they'll be able to communicate it and they know what their nation is doing. That is critical. So thank you so much for sharing that, Ken. Very, very important to look at not only the internal conditions, but the external conditions and that other aspect of making sure that there's a really good understanding of it, which means that operationally, as Ken was saying, that you've got multiple burners going, the complexity and detail of that's going to get really into fine detail. Members don't need to know that. They need to know the big goals, the big objectives, and what you've been able to realize. So you need to make that strat plan also accessible enough so that members understand and can share it. So using plain language, not overcomplicating things, making sure that if you can, your lens then is, can you share this with an elder, or can you share this with a teenager and they get it? And if you can do that, then you're doing a job of making sure that everyone understands the plan. So excellent, thanks so much. We also have a question from Geraldine in the chat room. How do you deal with nepotism in the community? This is a really, really good question, Geraldine. What we see is years and years of lawyers making tons of money off of our Indigenous people by developing conflict of policies. So conflict of interest policies that usually go into who's your brother, sister, aunt, parent, right? I mean, it's just ridiculous. Especially when we're dealing with small communities, you can have a cousin who you like more than your sister, and you're going to bend over backwards for the cousin, but they're not your sister, as lawyers try to define it. So you could still be in conflict, but still be in conformance with policies. What we try to do is set out conflict of interest policies to say what is fair and equitable, what is our job for future generations, not for the individuals, and really try to build that capacity across the board, supported by elders as much as possible, to talk about what you're there to do. And then develop policies that really just clearly talk about what is the potential for a perceived, real, or potential conflict of interest, whether it's financial or otherwise, and then stop there. Don't try and define brother, sister, aunt, any of those things, because it really can be abused. And really, if you focus on the spirit and intent of it, we can start to really talk about, I'm concerned about, there might be a potential conflict of interest. Let's talk about it and let's figure out how we can mitigate that risk. And it completely changes the tone. Like Ken was talking about, how you look at it, it changes the tone on how you approach it. It's a huge one. It's difficult to deal with. But again, start the conversation, start the work of doing circles around what this means, and not get sucked into the whole legal definitions of brother, sister, aunt, parent, right? Who you could be in conflict with, because it's really about maintaining the integrity of yourself and your leadership team and your nation, which should be the focus of the conversation. So it's a bit of a different way to come at it, as you're saying, to think outside the box, but we still get resistance from lawyers saying, no, we want to define brother, sister, aunt. It's like, no, you're making lots of money sitting here for hours talking about that, when really we need to just focus on the spirit and intent and develop a comfort level among leadership teams to say, I know you're not in conflict, you've got your head down, you're working on this, but I'm concerned that there might be a potential perceived or a real conflict of interest. We need to talk about it as a team for our nation to work through this and make sure that we don't have that risk arise. So it is a different way of talking about it. Geraldine, does that help in any way?
And I'll pick up on what they're finished off with, Geraldine. You speak to nepotism specifically. I mean, one of the things about good corporate governance and good governance is policy development, creating processes that are transparent. And that's an important component. We talked about the transparency in the slide back here. You've got to be, and so we have policies for different processes and transparency about qualifications. And so if you're going to be having an organization, you need to have some standards, you need to have some core competencies amongst some of the working standards. And so you want capable people in your organization, and not just someone who's related to somebody. So having policies around best practice, around hiring based on abilities and skills is part of the job requirements. So job descriptions are necessary in each of your entities as well. So that way, the best people are able to get the work, and it won't just be a case of we're going to leave it to one of our family members to take on that responsibility. So having that sense of good corporate governance around policies and job descriptions and qualification standards, competency matrices, we call that, when it comes to boards being selected. You want people who are going to be there long term for your board. You write down all the things you want to see in a perfect board member and go out and find them. You can develop some community members to fit that need, but it's not always available to you, unfortunately. So you look to get the best you can to benefit your nation today, and more importantly, emphasis on the future. You know, those people have to get outside their own personal interests and think more of the community as a large. So it's a tough road to hoe, but that's the long-term best practice we can recommend.
So when we, and I just want to add quickly to Mark's comments, when we take a look at that whole idea of hiring relatives or hiring someone close to you, it is really common, and I'm at a table right now where that's the discussion, and I raise the whole idea of maintaining the transparency and accountability to ensure that there's a fair, open hiring process. It's always an uphill push. So you have to get a leadership team committed to that. So really important to take a look at and get people committed to that kind of understanding. So we have a question from Geraldine. How do you get information from those hired to provide you with information, but not because of disclosure agreements that signed? Yeah, so that's really important when we take a look at information that you want to see shared. It really should be around the reporting requirements. And it doesn't mean that you have access to all information, but it does mean that you have to have access to the information of the organization. Without it, you can be concerned about that, and you would have a right to do that. So if you've been a part of hiring someone, or if there's someone hired, they really do have a responsibility to manage information and share as needed. So what you want to do is probably have an issue resolution policy where you can request, or an information access policy where you can request information and know that if you don't get it, you can move through a process to go to their manager, go to their executive director, go to the council or to the board to say this information needs to be transparent so that all people can understand it. And you know, if you do, be open to the idea that too, if there is something that's sensitive documents and there's a reason, that's fine, but provide a rationale. There should be no point of it where anyone says, I'm not giving you the information and I'm not providing you a rationale. It should be, here's why we can't provide the information. Here's a future date we should be able to share that information, but we're in the middle of sensitive conversations or negotiations. At the far end, that should be at a minimum, that there's a rationale behind it. And that should be supported by policies and other reporting that can at least show you some of the other information around that. So I hope that helps. So looking at just some of these ideas, it really helps with good corporate governance to improve the quality of the decision making, to improve the performance of your organization, to improve clarity for those staff who are working within it. It reduces stress and increases stability. It reduces conflict and supports a healthy, safe working environment for everybody. It also means that for members, that they can trust that there's going to be high quality decisions, that your organization will be accountable, that there'll be transparency and fairness, that there'll be stability in the community. It increases the organization's trust, credibility, and legitimacy, and reduces liability and conflict. And at the end of the day, results in improved socio and economic outcomes. So good leadership is huge, and we love sharing these ideas because hopefully they're going to help empower you to be the best leader you can be every single day. So if there's any other questions, please let us know. Geraldine, really appreciate some of your really great questions, and Ken for sharing. Aiden, if there's anything we missed, please let us know. Yeah, we do workshops in community. Geraldine, we're happy to, whether it's Zoom or in person. We just finished a 5-week travel, so we're used to being on the road. It's part of our life, and we love it because we love going into community and meeting people like all of you to be able to support you to do your best work for your nation. So thank you so much. And
hello.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't have a camera, but I do have a question for you.
Yes.
I guess just after talking about kind of the policies and procedures aspect of good governance, I guess it's a lot, I feel like, to design policies. So I guess like my question is, what would be like a good policy in your mind? Would it include like something like the rationale and something like the procedure behind, following through on the policy or something like that? Do you kind of
That's
like
a great question.
I just thought like the access and information policy and procedure, like that is a really important one. And I was like, wow, that is important, I think.
So what we normally include in any policy is a preamble that hopefully includes the history of why this rule is getting established, the purpose of the policy, the rule that applies and who it applies to, and when the policy was created and where amendments, how they would be referenced in terms within your organization. So those are some of the standard components that we have. And again, one of the things we think about, Aiden, when we do this work is using your language, because it makes a big difference when people look at it and say, oh, well, if we're going to say how that rule applies, well, we use this term, and that means that we really should be including the elders in deciding this, or we should really be taking a look at whoever have those gathering rates on those lands or whatever, right? So looking at your language will help inform those policies hugely to make sure it's culturally relevant. So but also if you Google some of the components, you'll find others that might apply as well. But feel free to email us. I'll put our emails in the chat room. We've got tons of tools and templates. We're at the point where we're starting to move into semi-retirement, and we like we said earlier, we are honored to share the knowledge and tools that we've developed over a quarter of a century. So we'll put our email in there, and please feel free to reach out if we can help serve you or your nation in any way.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. These two, again, they have offered many workshops with CANDO. Go back and reference them. Just brilliant, good knowledge. But I really appreciate what you do at the very beginning and then throughout is you take us on this journey. You remind us of who we are, where we come from, what our ancestors believed in, and what guided them to walk in good ways. And so I think that's just so foundational and so wonderful to bring to economic development and leadership. I think one of my takeaways was always being mindful of having that succession plan, always thinking about the 7 generations. It's not just about us. We're building here. We're building our capacity. We're learning, we're growing because we want to, set a standard. We want to have a better world for our kids. And those kids who haven't even been born yet. So thank you so much for the good knowledge that you shared this afternoon. We honor you. We appreciate deeply what you bring to the table in regards to leadership and economic development. So thank you. Thank you all for joining. Make note. I think, taking them up on their offer to go connect with them, shoot them an email. Do it. They're brilliant people, and this is such a gift. So thank you all for being here. I hope you have a good rest of the day, and we'll see you again.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye now.